friends didn't seem to know about that, but...
It's just a bizarre way to kill yourself, you know?
It's a really weird way to kill yourself.
I have heard of it it's actually more common than you would think.
Yeah.
I have heard of several instances where people with a convertible are like, you know what? I'm doing this. And so it's not uncommon. But what I want to know is, I've never actually seen anything that's listed. Do we know how much booze he had in him? Or if any?
There's no mention of it, so in all of the other ones, there's a mention that they were drunk or, inebriated in some way. There's no mention of that in this one, so I can only assume that he wasn't.
Okay.
Because they would have mentioned it. I mean, the police would have been like, also, he was super drunk, so of course he did this.
Right. Well, and that's why I'm asking. I mean, there's... There is, in one of the things that I read, talk about the fact that, how is it described? He had to use 4 lengths of rope to commit the act that he committed, but when they searched his car, they only found a receipt for 1 length of rope, and so that is pointed at as signs of foul play by conspiracies. Is it, well, obviously somebody had bought it because he realized they didn't have enough to get the job done because he couldn't have gone fast enough to pop his noggin off.
That's some serious premeditation of suicide, though.
Well, but it could also be that he happened to have a bunch of rope in his car and went, yeah, I'm kind of done, and I think I need a little more rope. And so he bought more rope.
I guess.
Yeah,
I just think, okay, so what? He, drove past the particular tree and thought, oh, that's a good tree. Oh, let me do some calculations to see how fast I'm going to have to be going, how fast my car can get there.
He's an exceptionally smart guy, but you know what?
Sure.
You know what? In the instances that I have heard about where people have done this before, there's a bit of revenge in that it's a jilted marriage situation.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that.
I'm gonna get divorced, and I'm gonna lose this nice convertible car I have. Let me go ahead and coat it in my own bodily fluids before she gets it.
Okay, well we'll talk a little bit more about this then later, because I think we're verging on.
I apologize. I realized
that's okay. Next up is Richard Pugh. Pugh worked as a computer consultant and digital communications expert for the Ministry of Defense. His death was ruled an accident, which I think is insane. He was found in his flat in January of 1987. His feet were bound. There was a plastic bag over his head and a rope tied around his body, which was then wrapped around his neck 4 times. Sure, yeah, he did that himself.
Yeah, it was ruled a sexual misadventure. I don't know if
it was ruled suicide. It wasn't even ruled misadventure. I thought it was ruled suicide.
I read in one place that it was ruled a sexual misadventure.
It was ruled an accident.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
Sorry,
it didn't specify. It just said it was an accident.
There's 25 of these, so I may be getting a few of them confused. Because it turns out this is not the only one that sounds like this that happens in this case. So
there is another one.
Okay, so that one was an accident. All right.
Okay.
Next up is Avtar Singhida. He was a researcher at the Ministry of Defense, and he had worked conducting tests on submarine warfare equipment, which would have included the Stingray torpedo.
Along with other things.
Yeah.
He's another one that just disappeared under weird circumstances. On January 8th, 1987, he was 3 weeks away from successfully defending his doctoral thesis. So he would have been a doctor, basically. I mean, he would have had his doctorate. He would have
finally achieved his degree.
He would have finally achieved his degree.
Which is a lot of work.
But he disappeared instead. And then he actually reappeared 4 months later.
He disappeared on the job.
He did. He just kind of walked away from his life with no explanation. He's
still alive, right?
He is, yeah. He had actually finally been traced to a red light district of Paris. And it was confirmed that he didn't really know how he got there or why he was there.
It must have been a fun weekend.
Well, no, it's 4 months.
4 months.
Yeah.
And actually, when he was found, he was working under an assumed name, and he was working in a sweatshop with illegal immigrants. And he's a bright guy, obviously. I mean, he's defending his dissertation. This is a guy who's really ambitious and educated and well-read. And, he's working for the Ministry of Defense, and what he decided to do, I guess, is work, really...
He just walked away from it all is really what this equates to.
Really walked away from it all, in the biggest way possible. So that is kind of odd.
I wonder if he retained his security clearance after that.
I presume so. He came back to work. I mean, he continued to work at Marconi, which is, again, kind of suspicious. Seems like they would maybe think, oh, this guy just walked away from his life, we should revoke his clearance. But no, they said, okay, yeah, come on back. That's fine.
Well, it means either he was not working at stuff that was too top secret, or maybe
they knew he disappeared for a reason.
Maybe they sat him down and had a talk, and he told them. He just won't tell reporters or anybody else.
It's possible, yeah. He was actually very good friends with Mr. Dudgeby, the one who
from the bridge.
Yeah, the one who fell. I'm using air quotes here. Fell from the bridge.
Yeah.
And when he returned, he said, "I don't want to talk about that, and I don't want to talk about my disappearance. I just want to get back to work."
Okay.
And Marconi said, "Cool."
By the way, he didn't fall from the bridge. He was tossed over the railing by a couple of big Russian guys.
Maybe. We don't know.
According to Joe.
Yeah.
According to Joe. Next up, Dr. John Britton. Dr. Britton worked on top secret projects for the Royal College of Military Science, then later for the Ministry of Defense. He died on January 17th, 1987 by way of carbon monoxide poisoning from his car in his garage.
Well.
He had literally just returned from a top secret trip to the United States related to his work with the Ministry of Defense.
He probably thought it'd be a good idea.
You were about to say Ministry of Magic, weren't you?
Yep.
I'm sorry, what were you saying, Joe?
He probably thought it'd be a great idea to just sit in his car with the engine running, listening to the radio.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Wanted to hear that last story on NPR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So NPR killed him.
Yeah.
NPR kills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or BBC.
I guess
the
it would be
BBC.
the Beeb. Yeah.
The Beeb.
The BBC kills more.
It does. It's true. Next up is David Skeels. He worked as an engineer for Marconi, and then he died the exact same way that...
Listening to the BBC?
Yeah, listening to the BBC.
Okay.
He's the same way as Dr. Britton did, but in February of 1987.
The difference between the two is that Britton didn't have the TV trope hose going from the window, from the exhaust pipe into his window.
That's true.
Whereas Skeels and everybody that follows does.
Yeah.
So that's, which I didn't realize. I totally thought that was a 1970s TV thing. I didn't think that actually happened.
Apparently, it's just a quicker way to do it. Instead of having to fill up the entire room, you just fill up your car.
I didn't know people sat in rooms with their cars running as a way to take their own lives. Is what I'm getting at.
It's actually not that uncommon.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's also not that uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's
true. You kind of go to sleep.
Yeah.
Next is Victor Moore. Mr. Moore was a design engineer for Marconi. He died also in February of 1987, but from a drug overdose. He had just finished his work on infrared satellites, and then he was found dead. His death apparently instigated an MI5 investigation, the results of which obviously still remain a secret. There's also a report that the Ministry of Defense Serious Crime Squad,
I like the name.
right?
Yeah. Cool.
Did a separate investigation into Marconi that was started because of this death.
I really just want to be on the Ministry of Defense Not Serious Crime Squad.
Not as serious,
Right.
right? I think that's the name of it. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, not a
It's
serious
Serious Crime Squad, not as Serious Crime Squad.
Well, no, I want to be on the not serious, as in nothing is serious, because that's kind of sometimes what I think we are.
Yeah, we are actually.
I actually want to work for the Ministry of Bad Haircuts.
Yeah. You're halfway there, Joe.
Thank you, Devin.
You're welcome. Next up is Peter Pipel. He was a scientist working for the Royal College of Military Science. He died on February 22nd of 1987. Yes, there's now 3 deaths in February of 1987.
This one was especially hinky, though.
He did also die in the same way as Dr. Britton and Mr. Skeels. His wife found him on his back with his head parallel to the rear of the car bumper and his mouth in line with the exhaust pipe of his car.
He was laying under the exhaust pipe, essentially.
Like literally drinking in the exhaust.
Essentially, yeah. And what I heard is his body was actually jammed underneath the car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So police apparently were pretty confused about how he could have gotten into that position. It sounds like his wife initially thought They were driving home from a function, and then she went inside. No, there was apparently like a weird noise coming from
like
the back
an
of the
engine
car.
knock kind of thing.
Yeah, and so she thought maybe he had been trying to investigate that and gotten stuck. I'm not 100% sure why she's the engine running when you're doing something like that, but okay.
Because that's the only way that you can hear the engine making the noise.
I guess. I think you would like turn it off and look for something loose first.
Yeah, the thing about it is especially if it sounds like there was little clearance under the car, and if it's been running, you just arrived home.
It's gonna be hot.
Your muffler especially is going to be, it will burn you. I actually at one time touched a muffler one time, and when the engine was running, and, well, I was sorry that I did that.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. And well, I will save it for later to say, because that actually gives me what I have thought about is a potential explanation of how he ended up in the position that he was in.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. He apparently, reportedly, friends and family, wife, blah, 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 all say there were no signs of stress in his life, so there was no reason for him to have committed suicide. He didn't work for the Royal College of Military Science anymore. He was in the research and development arm of the Ministry of Defense, but Pipel and Britton apparently worked together at the Royal College of Military Science, and Pipel was on that same trip to the United States as Dr. Britton was, and he had also recently just gotten back from the United States on their top secret mission.
That is a coincidence, huh?
By the way, did we say anything about the fact that these guys are not all in the same town?
No, they're all over Britain.
Yeah, I don't know that we've actually said that, though. Is that of the I don't know, half dozen or dozen people that we've talked about so far, it's not as if they were all, in one town or one city. They are all over.
Literally spread all over the country.
All over the country.
Small
so
though
that's
it may
important
be.
to keep in mind.
But yeah, it is important to keep in mind. Next is David Sands. He was a senior scientist working at a sister company of Marconi, and he had worked closely with Dr. Britton. He died on March 30th, 1987 in a fatal car accident. He made a sudden U-turn on a two-way lane highway on his way to work, who knows why, and then crashed at high speeds into an abandoned cafeteria that was out of use.
I've heard also abandoned
cafe.
Cafe, yeah.
Whichever.
Well, the British call them cafeterias. I've heard. I've seen it called that way. Yeah.
A restaurant.
But it was down. It wasn't like it was right on the edge of the road.
Right.
It was like down a little side inlet road that he managed to go careening down.
Yeah, he managed to hit the one spot in that area that was abandoned.
Nice. That was good of him because
Awfully lucky.
He loaded up his car with gasoline cans.
He had, yeah. He had 2 additional 5-gallon cans full of gas hanging out in his car.
And they sort of ruptured and blew up and turned into a fireball.
They did.
I
It's
heard.
weird.
Yeah.
It's like they were trying to destroy evidence.
Yeah, I think they identified him by dental records.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, no signs, no outward signs of a reason
No
for
indications of
suicide.
why.
Also a weird way to commit suicide, but okay.
It's actually kind of very male.
I guess.
Men tend to go out in violent ways.
Yeah, we've said that before, but like by pulling a U-turn and losing control of your car,
that's the thing.
Who said he lost control?
he lost control.
Well, I don't understand the U-turn thing. I mean, I would think just get on the freeway and just mash down the accelerator till you're maxed out in speed and then crash into like a bridge abutment or something like that.
Yeah, I would think
the
that
U-turn
too.
that doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, it's weird.
He may have missed his turn.
Yeah,
He may have said, "I'm going to hit that building that I know that nobody's in, and it's solid, and my car's going to go boom, and hell, I missed it." He flipped a Huey.
Well, could be.
But we'll talk about that more later.
Okay. Stuart Gooding was a postgraduate student at the Royal College of Military Sciences. He died on April 10th, 1987. He was in a fatal car crash in Cyprus. He died instantly when his hired car, which I believe is a rental car.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
So
because
he
he's on
was driving
vacation.
it. Yeah, he was driving it though. Like you'll see hired car. It's not like he hadn't hired someone. It wasn't a taxi or anything.
Yeah.
He was driving. He collided with head-on with a truck.
A semi.
A semi-truck, yeah. Or a lorry, as
Yep.
you might call it in the British Isles. The truck driver was said to be totally unhurt.
Well, that's
as
because,
were all the passengers.
Yeah, the truck is a lot bigger than the car, so.
Well, I thought isn't he the one that the passengers in the car were also unhurt?
I don't think there were any passengers.
Yeah, no, actually, I think you're right. I don't think there was passengers. There's somebody else that had passengers in a car, again, in one of the 25.
Yeah,
It's hard to keep track of them.
it is. It's really hard, which is why I'm appreciating this fact checking. Actually, usually I'd just be like, Steve, shut up. But now I'm like, no, thank you, keep coming. So it's kind of weird. I mean, that's another fatal car accident.
Okay, this is one of the ones that I'm going to call BS on for getting tacked. I consider this a tack in.
Yeah.
This got pinned into the list because we had to pad out to a big
25.
number.
Yep.
Because he's not anywhere remotely involved in anything else. He's on vacation.
Well, actually, he wasn't on vacation. He was in Cyprus because there was the
he's
Royal
on a diving
College
expedition. You're right.
Yeah.
But still,
they're carrying out quote unquote exercises.
This could have been an accident.
It could have been.
Or
it
it
also
could have been a big truck driven by a couple of big burly Russian guys.
Right. Could have been. Either way.
Yeah.
Hard to tell.
You got to stop blaming the Russians. It could have been the Cubans.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. In that part of the world, probably Russians. Next up is
Definitely wasn't the French.
David,
No.
a.k.a. Robert Greenhall. He was the contracts manager at Israel Chemicals Limited. He died from complications after he, quote-unquote, mysteriously leapt from a 40-foot or 12-meter high railway bridge. He was apparently on his way to work and decided to pull over and jump to his death.
4 hours after he had left home to go to work, by the way.
Yeah. This happened on April 10th of 1987. Same day as Stuart Gooding had his little car accident.
In Cyprus.
In Cyprus.
In another country.
Totally different country. The ICL, which is Israeli Chemicals Limited, later revealed that he had actually been positively vetted for clearance and had probably had access to secret UK and NATO data because of some of the contracts he was managing for them, which would have been connected to Star Wars and Stingray torpedo stuff. And he was working on the same defense project as David Sands, who you will remember from the U-turn incident.
And the fireball with the gas cans in the car.
Yeah. He actually didn't die immediately from his fall. He survived, and the emergency people came and took him away and took him to the hospital, and they said, okay, you fell. What happened there? And he said, I don't really know how or why I fell from that bridge, and then he died a couple days later in the hospital.
I have heard differing accounts on him. I have actually heard that though he has no memory of what happened that day, he did recover and survived.
Really?
Yeah.
You know,
Just saying, it's one of the sources that I found. I was like, wow, this is one of the ones that was a red flag for me.
That's a huge red
He
flag.
survived.
Because
Well-
I actually didn't see that anywhere.
yeah, I didn't either, but it is possible. Like, sometimes you can get a massive injury. Like, you can get. I knew a guy that was a paratrooper, and there was a guy in his battalion or whatever.
His unit.
Yeah. Well, and they jumped one day, and this guy's chute didn't open, and he augured in, and he walked away from it, and they just said, "Oh, cool," and then he died later that night.
Yeah.
He died. He had massive internal injuries, and nobody even knew, which is, by the way, incredibly negligent on the part of the Army. I mean, they should have had the guy. They should have had the guy in the hospital.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Every major organ was ruptured, but
Yeah.
it is possible also to fall and sustain massive injuries, but it's not going to kill you if you get treatment and you get long-term treatment for the time that it takes to be healed and corrected.
Yeah.
And this guy is, and the things that I found, was reported to live.
Yeah, so
it's
weird.
possible, but I can see a situation where you would have so many ruptures in your body that they just couldn't get in there everywhere.
It would be like that soaker hose that you have in your yard is just leaking everywhere. There's no way you can plug it all.
No, not
Little
really.
Dutch boy in the dam.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, I guess we can just chalk that up to
Reporting?
I
mean, yeah, I don't know.
It's weird. I mean, it's weird that he wouldn't remember ever why he fell, but there's also such a thing as, head trauma related
short-term memory loss.
Absolutely.
So, like,
I'm not surprised at all. you
Either
know.
way, it is kind of weird though. Like 4 hours later, suddenly you're just on a railroad bridge, jumping
Or falling.
or falling.
You know, it's
whichever.
usually pretty easy to stay on those things. Although, I don't know. I mean, if you're on a railroad bridge, although what the hell was he doing on a railroad bridge?
Right, exactly.
Often railroad bridges don't have guardrails on
No,
them.
no, because trains don't tend to fall off of them.
Usually,
Well,
so there's no need to put a
pretty good
They
at
actually,
guardrail
they
on.
actually do tend to fall off of them occasionally, but you know, what guardrail is going to stop
It's not
the train? You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to build a tunnel to
Yeah.
stop that.
You need to build a
So-
pretty massive guardrail. Yeah.
next up is going to be George Countess. He was a system analyst at Bristol Polytech, and on April 17th, 1987, he was drowned as a result of a car accident into a river. His car was found upside down in a river in Liverpool.
I presume he was inside it.
He was
He
inside
was,
of it.
yes. Which I'm going to say right now, again, I feel like that one is tacked in.
I agree, especially because, like, systems analyst at Bristol Polytech, like, I didn't really find a good connection to the rest of these.
It
is right.
This is that we're in this industry at this point. This story is one of the ones that starts expanding.
Yeah.
Occasionally reaches out and grabs a guy that's in the biz.
Well, it
and
is. I mean,
makes a connection.
it's in the biz. Died under what could be kind of interpreted as questionable circumstances in the like midst of literally within like there's a 2 or 3 month period here where suddenly a bunch of people are dying.
Yeah.
So I can understand why it would be looped in. I don't know that it necessarily is right for it to be looped in, but I totally understand why people see this one as connected to the case.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Shawnee Warren, and this is the only woman on this list.
And Shawnee's also that one that we've put the question mark around to be the 26. I mean, you keep saying there 25 were involved in the biz.
No,
But Shawnee
she's
wasn't.
not the one that I put the question.
Oh,
mark
okay.
on,
Yeah,
actually.
the 26 was.
Is a journalist.
Okay.
Yeah, in the 90s.
Okay, because I don't think Shawnee is again a good one to be put into this. I say there's suspicion around her death.
Oh, she was
I don't
definitely
disagree
murdered.
with that at
Yeah.
all, but I don't think that her employment had any connection.
I'm not sure.
Probably
We'll find
random.
out.
I'm
So let's
ahead
go
of
ahead.
the game. I
You are.
apologize.
So-
Please, Devin, tell us what happened to this poor woman.
Ms. Warren was a personal assistant at a company called Microscope. Yes, just like a microscope, but 2 words. And this
Clever
company
British.
was purchased by Marconi about a month after her death, within a month of her death. She was found drowned in 18 whole inches of water.
That's actually kind of deep,
Yeah.
based on the situation.
Well, based on the situation, to where Miss David, aka Robert, was found having jumped off the bridge. She was found gagged with a noose around her neck. Her feet were bound. Her hands were tied behind her back. She was wearing stiletto shoes and business formal attire. The coroner lists her death as like open/under investigation, but apparently speculated publicly that she had, quote, gagged herself, tied her feet with a rope, then tied her hands behind her back and hobbled to the lake on stiletto heels to drown herself, unquote.
Maybe he was being,
Sure.
Maybe he was being like flip, you know.
Well, no,
Maybe
that
he's
was
being
in
a
his
little
report.
sarcastic.
But the hard part about this is her footprints were in the riverbed, but there were no other footprints taking her out to the point at which her footprints stopped happening.
So you're saying basically aliens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Now, this has the stink of murder all over it.
I call huge BS on this. Like, I wear stiletto shoes every once in a while, and I swear to you, we'll get you a size, whatever size you are, stiletto shoe, and we will go down to the riverbank, and you try to walk more than 2 steps without your feet being tied in that mud, and you tell me that it's possible.
I don't know. I've seen women in some pretty snug little skirts that have to do the 2-inch little jitter to move forward.
in mushy mud on a riverbank.
Yeah, the shoes are going to come off your feet.
Well, if she moves fast enough, as I saw in Scooby-Doo, you can run across the surface of the water before you start to sink.
You can, that's true. It's really easy to do that when your feet are tied together.
Yeah.
And a plastic bag is over your head.
There is all kinds of hinkiness with her death. I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah.
And by the way, I tried to pull the coroner's report. I also ended up trying to pull the police report on her death, and then that led me to trying to find them all. It turns out, whereas here we can get a lot of that stuff depending on where it happened online, yeah, you can only get it in person in Britain.
Well, we have a lot of listeners in Britain. We should have called one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Next time.
You also got to pay for it.
Well, they'll pay for it.
They'd be happy to.
I bet we could find at least one listener in that
In
area that would
every
pay
district
for it.
that this was happening, you're
totally.
right. We should have done that.
Yeah.
My bad.
Well, and I don't.
Lazy Steve.
I guess I don't necessarily think. I go either way on her actual involvement. I mean, if Microscope was purchased by Marconi, and she was a high-level executive assistant, she would have likely seen most of the correspondence coming in and out from the highest levels, which means she would have likely had her own clearance, which means she would have been privy to some details. But Steve shaking his head, because I also think, like, that could be total BS, and, like, that's not accurate at all.
You're
Who knows?
presuming that Microscope was involved in what Marconi was working on. They may not have been brought in because of their Star Wars and what was the torpedo name?
Yeah, the Stingray.
Thank you. I suddenly forgot the name of the torpedo. There's something that was related to it. They may have just been a company who had, as we see all the time, a great idea and a great start somewhere, and Marconi went, "We're buying that all. We're taking it."
Or it could have been. Yeah, they could have been actually
Completely unrelated.
They could have been actually manufacturing or some completely non-classified stuff. Maybe just manufacturing equipment that Marconi wanted.
Totally, absolutely.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what these guys did.
Well, so I guess we can all agree that at least in her case,
she got murdered.
She was murdered.
She's totally murdered.
Oh, yeah.
But whether that has something to pertain to the rest of these or not, who knows?
It's a weird little case, though.
Yeah. Next up, Mark Wisner. He was a software engineer at the Ministry of Defense. He was found dead on April 24th, 1987, in a house that he shared with two colleagues. He had a plastic sack around his head and several feet of cling wrap, saran wrap,
Plastic
wrapped around his face. May sound similar because that's how Mr. Pugh died. This death was also ruled an accident.
Again, sexual misadventure.
Autoerotic asphyxiation.
It wasn't. They just
is what it is. It is always classified
This
under.
is Britain, so they just call it an accident.
Yeah.
Whereas we have this weird descriptive phrase for it.
Yeah.
But Wisner was known to. I think this might not have been his only time of exploring the kink. Because there are reports of some things. Apparently, he had some articles of women's attire, so that it was on him. So it may not. This one may actually just be purely an accident, misadventure of the sexual kind.
Fair, yeah. Michael Baker was a digital communications expert who died on May 3rd, 1987 in a fatal car accident.
He's the one that we were trying to think of earlier.
Yeah.
He's the one who I think it was two other people were in the car.
Totally
and they
uninjured.
were they were unhurt.
They were some burly Russian guys.
I don't think so, Joe.
No, they were just two other normal British people who were in the car that were not severely injured or killed in said accident.
Yeah. Well, suspicious, probably not as suspicious, but a little. Yeah. Frank Jennings was an electronic weapons engineer, and he died of a heart attack in June of 1987. I think that's the dumbest thing ever.
He was 60 years old, and this is another pin.
Yeah.
He was pinned in.
Absolutely. That's what I mean by the dumbest thing ever. I should clarify. I don't think it's dumb that he died of a heart attack. That's really sad.
I think his inclusion
it's
is
silly
dumb.
that he's included, but I'm going to include him anyway because he's on like every list you'll see ever.
Right.
Because at this point, the dominoes are just like, right?
Or just randomly being connected.
Yeah. Next up is Russell Smith. He was a lab tech at Atomic Energy Research Establishment, which is the name of the company. In
I like it.
January 1988, he fell off a cliff and died, which was ruled a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Even though
Found halfway down it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because they always say it was a suicide. He fell. Like those are the two phrases they use. They're never like he jumped.
Yeah, I think that's an odd attempt to preserve. God, I can't think of the word that I want to say for their dignity or their honor. But it's like he fell. That's what happened. He must have accidentally fell. He fell on purpose.
Yeah, he fell on purpose. Yeah. Next up is Trevor Knight. He was a computer engineer with Marconi Space and Defense Systems, which is Marconi. On March 25th of 1988, Mr. Knight was found dead in his home at the wheel of his car with a hose pipe connected to the exhaust. I know this song.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
A fellow female employee at Marconi claimed that she had found 3 different suicide notes left by him, which made clear his intentions of suicide. This female friend also mentioned that Mr. Knight disliked his work, but she didn't think that he was depressed or had any kind of signs of suicide or anything like that.
Yeah, the next one chose a more interesting suicide method.
Well, I don't know if suicide is the right word for it. Alistair Beckham was a software engineer for Marconi. He was found dead in August of 1988 after being electrocuted in his garden shed with wires that connected to his body, I think via his mouth. And then
no, that was not him.
Oh, no, you're right. Sorry, I'm getting too switched. They were in his armpits?
He wrapped. I think he attached him to his body
somehow.
It was like kind of an improvised defibrillator.
Yeah.
In his garden shed.
And he had a handkerchief stuffed in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
His death is, for obvious reasons, still under investigation because that doesn't really seem like a suicide thing.
Well, that's not how I would choose to do it. But yeah, he taped him to both sides of his chest, I guess, and then plugged the cord into the wall.
So.
Yeah.
That's the speculation if he killed himself, right? I mean, it's totally...
Because for all accounts, he'd come home, he had walked the dog, he had gone and gotten the paper, like he had done all these very normal routine-like things that day, and then just randomly walked into the garden shed and wired himself up.
Yeah, which seems a little weird.
It does.
And actually, to follow a trend, seems kind of like a Russian thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it does. You're laughing, but like...
They like to use car batteries. Car batteries hurt, but don't kill you.
Yeah, well, maybe they were actually aiming to kill this time.
Oh, well, maybe.
And actually, one of the reasons that this might be even more suspicious is that also in August of 1988, they think probably August 22nd or 23rd, I've seen both dates, Perry Ferry.
What kind of a name is that?
British.
Was a retired Army brigadier and the assistant marketing director at Marconi. He was also electrocuted. He was electrocuted in his company flat, his Marconi company flat, with electrical leads in his mouth.
Yeah, apparently he spliced him jammed
into his fillings,
jammed it between his teeth, or attached him to his fillings, and then just plugged it into the wall. And
uncomfortable all around.
That just sounds bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think suicide in this case because his parents sadistically named him Perry Ferry.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's weird. It's weird that like within a month, 2 people related to Marconi died from self-administered
electrocution
in the same month. Yeah,
that's weird.
But he's the one that had not too long before that some near fatal something in a car. He was in a car accident. He was trapped in the car, and so he kind of had this thing going on, according to people who were around him. Panic. I don't know.
I still think it's super Russian.
Well, I like that idea.
Joe has biased you.
But also, like, in a month, really? 2 dudes electrocuting themselves? Mm-hmm. It's like they hired a new hitman. I mean, I mean, like, there are these clusters, and we'll talk about this in theories, but...
well, there's, there are, like, several different suicides in this one that were rule suicides that are rather bizarre. Yeah. You know, we'll talk about them later.
We will, in just a minute, actually, because we're very close here. Andrew Hall was an engineering manager with British Aerospace. He was found dead in September of 1988 by carbon monoxide poisoning in his car with a hose pipe connected to the exhaust, which was ruled a suicide. I'm bored of that story.
I really think we need to find out who manufactured those hoses.
Yeah.
And sue them.
Probably.
Because they obviously, there was a problem with their hoses because
Yeah.
they were putting carbon monoxide in people's cars.
Yeah, they were.
Apparently.
And then the 26th one is a guy by the name of Jonathan Moyle. He was a British defense journalist, and he was found hanged in his hotel room in Santiago, Chile on April 1st, 1990. And it was ruled a suicide officially, but apparently he did a lot of the reporting initially on the Stingray torpedo. There's that.
Do you know who else is loosely connected to this story?
Who? Ronald Reagan.
Danny Casolaro.
Oh!
You remember him from The Octopus?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
because he worked for, what was the magazine, Computer World? Or he worked for it or owned it? I can't remember now. It's been so long since we talked about him.
Yeah, that's been a long time.
But they did some of the early reporting that was compiling this stuff, and I don't know if he was involved. We always
Yes.
find these strange links between these stories.
Yeah.
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy!
Well, Danny thought everything was kind of interconnected, you know?
Well,
As it is.
Or at least a
Yeah.
lot
It
of
was.
all different tentacles of the octopus.
Mm-hmm.
Theories?
theories.
You know about theories?
Yeah, what are your theories?
Well, either it's murder or it's not.
Well,
Or it's some combination of both.
I think a combination. I think some of these things look kinky enough.
So, they were all murdered. Let's do that as a theory. They were all murdered.
Don't
Every
think
single
so.
one of them.
Except for the suicides?
That's dumb.
But as you know, like heart attacks can be induced by chemicals, poisons.
They can,
Yeah.
True.
but he was a 60-year-old dude
There's that too.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Yeah.
Which in Britain was nothing but pork fat and beans every night.
Yeah, I believe that's true, right?
So healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure.
Blood
Because
sausage.
my culinary experience with Britain is completely accurate.
I agree. Okay, so we can all agree that it's not all murders.
No.
Can we also all agree that the theory that none of these deaths are suspicious at all is silly?
Oh, that there's no
Oh, yeah.
actual link between any of them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's silly.
That's silly.
Yeah,
right?
some of them are, and and there's also some of them. I mean, they could have been murders, but they're not related to the defense industry.
Right. Also possible.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Was a smiley face ever found spray painted near the body?
Yeah. Actually, there was a smiley face within a certain distance of everybody.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes.
So we are going to go ahead and say that our favorite theory is that some of these are questionable and some of them are not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some of them shouldn't be included.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, definitely not. But there were four of them, the four most spectacular suicides, which would be Sharif and Sands and Beckham and Ferry.
At the very least.
Yeah, those ones we're talking Sharif, decapitation by rope in the car.
Well, hang on, Joe. Let's take these in order because
Okay.
you've actually ignored some
Okay.
Yeah.
that people have pointed out as being completely questionable.
Really suspicious. Yeah. So actually, let's just go ahead and start.
We'll just read. We're gonna walk through every one of these again in order.
No, we're not. We're not
right.
doing that.
Thank goodness.
But let's start with Dr. Bowden's car accident.
He was the very first
The
victim.
very first one, 1982, way back when, before Little Devon ever existed in this whole world. Dr. Bowden had a car accident. The story goes, right, that Dr. Bowden's immaculately maintained Land Rover careened across a 4-lane highway and plunged off a bridge, down an embankment, onto an abandoned rail yard. Bowden was found dead on the scene.
And nobody
He
else got hurt.
Nobody else got hurt. Nobody else even saw it. Pretty lucky, right? There was obviously an inquest into this. And the police testified that Bowden's blood alcohol level had exceeded the legal limit and he'd been driving way too fast. So he was drunk, he was driving real fast and reckless, he accidentally careened off the highway, blah, blah, blah. His wife, Dr. Bowden's wife, her name's Hillary, and her lawyer think that's silly. Not silly.
I think the
They
word you're looking
inaccurate.
for is cover up.
It's a cover-up, is what they think. And actually, friends that were with Bowden at the social event that he was at prior to his death agree he was not drunk. He had been drinking, but he wasn't drunk. They also, well, the friends don't mention, but the wife mentions the condition of the car. They apparently had a specialist, quote-unquote specialist, examine the car. And that specialist told them that somebody had taken the wheels off and put old, worn-out wheels onto his Land Rover, which, I don't know, I go either way. Like, all reports are from many different aspects in his life that he loved this car. He maintained it as best as he possibly could, and he was a man of, well, I mean, he was
a man of means.
He was a man of means, so he would have had tires that had the appropriate tread on them, presumably. He would have had a car that was in good condition, but apparently the police said, no, the wheels were worn, that was part of it. He, just took off.
It could have been that, of course, being a man of means, I mean, this is something they look for. If somebody wrecks their cars, they look to see, did he like replace his tires with old, used crappy tires before he deliberately wrecked his car to collect, an insurance payout? Could have been. Maybe he was trying to do that.
Well, but
he was wealthy enough. I don't think he needed to.
Tires have a lifetime.
Yeah.
And there is a point when you come to the end of that tire's lifetime where the tread is no longer safe to drive upon, and it is time to replace it. And he could have very well been near that at the point at which he had his accident. And you know what happens when you take a severe turn and go across a highway and then down an embankment? Everything gets thrashed.
Yeah.
Could be that.
So it's entirely possible that his tires got just torn up. It's also possible that somebody at the wrecking yard went,
that's what I was thinking too.
That's a nice set of tires, and they said he did it. And they switch them out. At which point, then this examiner comes and says, "Ooh, these are old. This is weird."
I know. That's what I was thinking too. Let's see, because it sounds like the guy probably had a really nice set of tires on there.
The other thing about his not being drunk is that if he's at an event, I don't know if you guys have ever been at an event where somebody says, "Wait, have one for the road," and you suddenly have 2 for the road, and 3 for the road, and 4 for the road, and then you hit the road. And you're fine when you walk out of said location, but then you're 5 minutes away, and it starts to hit you.
Yeah. It's my understanding it was like a work social function, so one...
Oh, that's even more indicative of getting drunk.
It's maybe. I mean, I think it can go either way. Either it is totally indicative of him getting drunk, or it's totally indicative of him not being drunk, which is kind of a bummer, because it depends on the kind of person he was, and you can only take that from, what his family says, and his family says he was not that kind of guy, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Next up is Walsh, who you may or may not remember was in West Africa and quote-unquote fell out of a window. He did have a flight the next
Reportedly,
day.
He had a flight for the next day.
So, presumably it's not a suicide, although maybe it is. I mean, he was there for a work thing. Presumably they booked his flights there and back, so...
That's a good point.
Hard to tell.
Our conspiracist friends would say that is indication that he was not intending to take his life while he was there.
Could have been an accident.
Well, but I mean, it's also true that it's totally possible it was an accidental fall. Next up, while we're talking about weirdness, is Dodgy Police say that he was depressed. His friends say no, so I'm not sure how the police would know, and his friends didn't, but okay.
Oh, you can look at a corpse and see,
Yeah, you can see. Kind of sad.
Yeah.
Police say he was drunk. Friends say he had never had any alcohol ever, and I think that's a religion thing. He was Pakistani.
So he's a Muslim, probably.
He was likely a Muslim, and if he was, that's a tenet of a lot of different parts of...
But I want to be careful here, because his friends didn't say he didn't drink. They said he rarely drank.
I've heard that some of his friends said he never drank.
Okay, but the reason I say that is because in the same reporting, it is reported that bottles of wine were found in his car. And that's where I also get that it was that people said, well, he never drank while driving, but he would occasionally drink.
Okay, so the reporting I heard on this, and this is one of those things where it's like, who knows, right? The reporting I heard on this is that the police initially said, oh, he was drunk. And his friend said, no, he didn't drink at all. And they said, no, he was drunk. We found 2 paper cups and an empty bottle of wine in his car. He was drinking with a friend, And then the friend, I don't know where the friend went, but suddenly, he was jumping off a bridge. That's what the police said.
And by the way, that bridge was a location that was known for people to go to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Because it was a convenient high. Yeah, it was a convenient high spot.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree, but it's still kind of wonky that, his friends would say, no, he didn't drink, and the police would say, okay, but we found this thing. And they just totally disregard the friend. They say he was drinking with a friend, and then suddenly he was committing suicide, and nobody ever says, like, where was the friend? What was the time frame? What's the story there? So I think that's a little odd. And then also the whole, like, injection mark on